He's pulling away. You can feel it. That every time you try to bring it up, he flips it on you and suddenly you're the problem. What if I told you this isn't about his attachment style at all? What if this is something much darker? Something he's doing on purpose? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to see him so clearly, it might actually hurt. And if you've ever felt crazy for suspecting something was off, drop the word clarity in the comments right now, because you're not crazy. You never were. Also, don't forget to subscribe, because we cover the kind of conversations nobody else is willing to have. Now let's get into it. There is a version of the avoidant that relationship coaches love to talk about. The emotionally unavailable man who just needs space. The guy who had a difficult childhood. The person who loves you but doesn't know how to show it. And look, that man does exist. That is a real thing. Attachment trauma is real. Emotional unavailability is real. And sometimes people genuinely struggle to connect because of wounds they've been carrying since they were children. But there is another version of the avoidant that nobody wants to talk about. And that version is using the label as a cover. He's using your compassion against you. He's using everything you've learned about psychology and attachment theory as a weapon to keep you confused, to keep you doubting yourself, and most importantly, to keep you from looking too closely at what he's actually doing when he's not with you. That's what we're talking about today. 5 things an avoidant does when he is hiding another woman. And I want you to really sit with this, because some of these are going to feel incredibly familiar. Some of these are going to make you put your hand over your mouth. And some of these are going to make you finally understand why you've been feeling so off for so long without being able to explain it to anyone, including yourself. Let's start with the first one. He makes you feel like your needs are the problem. This is the foundational move. This is where everything starts. And if you don't understand this one deeply, the other 4 won't make sense, because they all build on this. When you're with a man who is hiding something, the most dangerous thing that can happen to him is you feeling secure. A secure woman asks questions. A secure woman trusts her gut. A secure woman doesn't accept half answers. A secure woman looks him in the eye and says, something doesn't add up and I need you to explain it to me. So what does he do? He makes sure you never feel secure. And the way he does that is by making your needs the problem. You want to talk about the future? Suddenly you're too intense. You want to know why he didn't text back for 6 hours? Suddenly you're being controlling. You want consistency? Suddenly you're suffocating him. You want to feel chosen? Suddenly you're being needy and insecure, and he thought you were more independent than this. And here's where it gets really painful, because you are a smart woman. You have probably read things. You've probably listened to content about relationships. You understand that men need space. You understand that chasing pushes people away. You understand the anxious avoidant trap. So when he tells you that you're being too much, a part of your brain says, maybe he's right. Maybe I am being anxious. Maybe this is my attachment style acting up. Maybe I need to work on myself. And that's exactly what he wants you to think. Because the moment you turn the spotlight onto yourself, it's off him. The moment you start questioning your own sanity, your own reactions, your own perception, you stop questioning his behavior. And his behavior is exactly what needs to be questioned. Let me be very direct about something. There is a difference between a man who pulls away because he's genuinely overwhelmed and needs time to regulate, and a man who makes you feel crazy for wanting basic relationship things like communication, consistency, and honesty. The first man will come back. The first man will acknowledge that his pulling away affected you. The first man will not make you feel like a burden for having feelings. The second man will keep the spotlight permanently on your flaws, because that's the only way he can keep his hidden. Pay attention to how you feel after your conversations with him. Do you feel heard? Do you feel like he actually listened and tried to understand? Or do you walk away feeling like you're too much, like you messed up again, like you need to do better, be less, ask for less, need less? If it's consistently the second one, you're not dealing with attachment issues. You're dealing with manipulation, and there is a difference. Now, the second thing. He creates chaos right before the moments that matter. This one is so subtle. This one is so cleverly disguised that most women don't even realize it's happening until they look back months later and see the pattern. Watch what happens right before significant moments. Right before a weekend where you had plans together. Right before he was supposed to meet your friends. Right before an important conversation you'd been trying to have. Right before a holiday. Right before anything that would require him to show up fully and be present and accountable. Something blows up. He picks a fight over something small. He suddenly needs space because he's feeling overwhelmed. He becomes cold and distant for no apparent reason. He does something that sends you into an emotional spiral, so that by the time the event arrives, either you're too hurt to enjoy it, or the plans get cancelled altogether, or you spend the whole time trying to repair something instead of being present. And here's the genius, and I use that word very bitterly, of this strategy. He never has to cancel anything. You either cancel it yourself because the tension is too much, or the event happens but it's miserable. Or he shows up but he's so checked out that you don't even get the connection you were hoping for. And then afterward, if you bring it up, he can say, "I showed up, didn't I? What more do you want from me?" This pattern exists for a very specific reason. When things are stable and good between you two, you expect more. When things are stable, you start having hopes and expectations and future thoughts. When things are stable, you start to look around and notice things like, why does he always put his phone face down? Why is he sometimes available at weird hours but then completely unreachable at others? Why does he sometimes smell different when he comes home? Why does he seem distracted in a way that has nothing to do with work? Stability creates clarity, and clarity is his enemy. So he keeps things unstable. He keeps you emotionally activated. He keeps you focused on the state of the relationship between you two, so that you never have enough mental and emotional bandwidth to focus on what might be happening outside of it. If you look back on your relationship right now, can you identify this pattern? Can you see the moments where things were starting to feel good and then suddenly something happened to disrupt it? Not occasionally, not once or twice, consistently, predictably, almost like clockwork. That is not a coincidence. That is not his attachment style. That is strategy. The third thing, he uses vulnerability as currency. Now, this one is going to be harder to hear because this is the one that made you fall for him in the first place. This is the one that made you think you were special. This is the one that made you stay when everything else was telling you to go. At some point, probably early on, he opened up to you. He told you something real, something painful. Maybe he told you about his childhood. Maybe he told you about a past relationship that broke him. Maybe he told you about his fears, his insecurities, the ways he's struggled. And it felt so intimate. It felt so rare because men don't usually do this. Men don't usually open up like this. So when he did, you thought, he trusts me. He chose me. I see a side of him nobody else gets to see. And that created a bond. That created a deep feeling of responsibility. Because when someone shows you their wounds, you don't want to add to them. You become protective of them. You start making excuses for their behavior because you understand where it comes from. You start tolerating things you wouldn't normally tolerate because you've seen the vulnerable boy underneath the difficult man. Here's the thing though, vulnerability is only real when it comes with accountability. Vulnerability is only genuine when the person doing it is actually trying to grow, actually trying to show up differently, actually working on the things they've shared with you. But when a man uses vulnerability to buy himself permission to keep hurting you, that's not vulnerability. That's a tactic. When he opens up about how much his ex hurt him every time you try to hold him accountable, That's a tactic. When he brings up his difficult past every time you have a conversation about his behavior, that's a tactic. When he cries or shuts down or goes quiet in a way that makes you feel guilty for bringing something up, and then nothing actually changes, that's a tactic. Because here's what real vulnerability looks like. Real vulnerability sounds like, I know I've been distant, and I understand why that's scary for you, given what we've been building together, and I want to figure out how to do better. Real vulnerability sounds like, I hear you when you say you feel like you're not a priority, and that breaks my heart because you should feel like one. What can I do differently? Real vulnerability moves toward you. It takes responsibility. It tries to close the gap. Fake vulnerability moves away from it. It redirects. It makes you the comforter. It puts you in a position where you can't keep pressing because now you'd just be kicking someone when they're down. If every difficult conversation you try to have ends with you consoling him instead of being heard yourself, sit with that, because that is a very specific kind of trap. And it works so well because it uses your empathy against you. It uses the best parts of you, your compassion, your understanding, your willingness to see the human behind the behavior, to keep you from seeing the full picture. Let's talk about the fourth thing. He manages your access to him in very deliberate ways. This is where the practical evidence lives. This is where if you slow down and pay attention, you start to see things that you can't unsee. There are windows when he's available to you and windows when he's not. And the interesting thing is that those windows tend to be pretty consistent. He texts back quickly in the mornings, but goes quiet in the evenings. Or he's very present on weekdays, but becomes hard to reach on weekends. Or he's always available for a spontaneous afternoon, but never available for a spontaneous night. Or he can always talk on the phone, but never on video. Or he responds to texts, but never calls when he's out. And when you notice these patterns and you bring them up, he has an explanation for every single one. He's tired in the evenings. He's with his boys on weekends. He's not a phone person. He doesn't like video calls. The explanations are always just plausible enough that you can't argue with them. But there are so many of them, and they always work in the same direction, which is keeping you in a specific box that doesn't overlap with something else he has going on. Think about the last time you tried to be spontaneous with him. Think about the last time you showed up unexpectedly, or suggested something last minute, or tried to reach him outside of the usual window. What happened? Was he delighted? Was he warm and welcoming? Or was there a flicker of something else? Panic, maybe. Irritation, a very smooth and practiced reason why it wasn't a good time. Think about his phone. You're not supposed to snoop. I'm not telling you to snoop. But just think about how he behaves around his phone with you. Is it face down always? Does he take it with him everywhere, including the bathroom? Does he angle the screen away when he's using it? Does he silence notifications when you're together? Does he step out to take calls? Does he respond to messages and then quickly turn the screen off? None of these things alone are evidence of anything. People have privacy. People are allowed to have privacy. But the question is whether his privacy feels natural or whether it feels managed. There's a difference between a man who is simply a private person and a man who is actively controlling what you can and cannot access. And the difference is that the private man is consistent. His privacy doesn't have specific shapes and patterns that always seem to protect specific pockets of time or specific kinds of contact. The man who is hiding something has what I'd call curated privacy. It looks like a preference, but it functions like a firewall. And the more you pay attention, the more you realize that the firewall has a very specific shape. The shape of whoever or whatever he doesn't want you to find. There's also something that happens with how he talks about other women in his life, or rather, how he doesn't. A man who has nothing to hide doesn't compartmentalize the people in his life. He mentions his female friends naturally, the way you'd mention anyone you know. He doesn't make a big deal out of it, and he doesn't avoid it either. It just comes up the way normal life comes up. But a man who is hiding something becomes strange around the topic of other women. He either over-explains them or he doesn't mention them at all. He'll tell you way more than you needed to know about why a certain woman is absolutely not someone he has feelings for, almost defensively, almost before you've even thought to ask. Or there are women in his world that he's clearly in contact with because you've seen a notification or a name, but he never mentions them voluntarily and deflects smoothly if it ever comes up. Both of those behaviors, the over-explanation and the total absence, are two sides of the same thing. They're both management. They're both him controlling the narrative around what you know and don't know about who has access to him. Now, the fifth thing, and this is the most important one, this is the one that actually keeps everything else in place. He makes leaving feel like failure. Everything we've talked about so far works because of this final piece. You can identify the pattern. You can feel that something is wrong. You can even start to put the pieces together. But if he's done this fifth thing successfully, you still won't leave. Not because you don't see it, but because leaving feels impossible. And the way he makes leaving feel impossible is very specific. He doesn't do it by being wonderful. He does it by making you feel like you owe him your patience, like you would be giving up on someone who needs you, like you'd be proving him right about the fact that nobody stays, like you'd be abandoning someone in their most vulnerable moments, like the relationship you've built means nothing if you walk away now, like the investment you've already made, the time, the energy, the love, all of that disappears if you go. He ties your sense of loyalty and compassion to his ability to keep doing exactly what he's doing. And there's often an intermittent reinforcement pattern here too. This is the thing that really creates the addiction. Because it's not all bad. He's not cold and distant 100% of the time. There are moments where he's exactly who you fell for. Moments where you feel the connection you've been starving for. Moments where he looks at you like you're the only person in the room and everything feels like it's going to be okay. Those moments matter so much because they're so rare. The scarcity makes them feel more significant than they are. When you're emotionally hungry and someone finally gives you a meal, it tastes different than it would if you were fed consistently. It feels more intense, more real, more worth protecting. So you hold on, not because the relationship is good overall, but because those moments are just good enough to keep hope alive. And that's the trap. That's the architecture of it. You're not staying because things are great. You're staying because things are occasionally great. And you're terrified that if you go, you'll lose those moments and you'll never find something that feels that intense again. But I need to say this to you as clearly as I can. That intensity is not love. That intensity is the relief of receiving something after being deprived. And there is a version of love that doesn't require deprivation to feel intense. There is a version of love that is consistent and calm and present and still manages to take your breath away, not because you've been starved, but because it's genuinely, deeply real. The avoidant who hides women is counting on you not to know that. He's counting on you to believe that this is as good as it gets, that all relationships feel this way, that your anxiousness is the issue, that if you could just be calmer, more secure, less needy, more trusting, things would be different. But things wouldn't be different because the issue isn't you. The issue is that you're in a relationship with someone who has chosen deception over honesty and is using every tool available, including your own growth, your own empathy, your own intelligence, to keep you in the dark. Now I want to talk about something that doesn't get said enough in this conversation, which is what to do with all of this. Because information without direction just creates more anxiety. And I don't want you walking away from this feeling more lost than when you started. The first thing I want you to understand is that recognizing this pattern doesn't mean you have to blow everything up immediately. I know that's what some voices online will tell you. They'll say, get out now, block and delete, move on. And sometimes that's exactly right. But sometimes you need a minute to process what you're realizing. And that's okay. Clarity takes time, and clarity is what you're building right now. The second thing I want you to understand is that your gut has been right this whole time. Not your anxiety, not your fear, your gut. There's a difference. Anxiety says everything is wrong and nothing will ever be okay. The gut says something specific doesn't add up. Anxiety spirals. The gut lands on something particular and it stays there. If you've been feeling that something specific is wrong, not just a general sense of insecurity, but a specific, quiet, persistent sense that something is not what it appears to be, that gut feeling deserves to be honored, not ignored, not medicated with hope, honored. The third thing, and this might be the most important thing I say in this entire video, you are not responsible for saving someone who is using you. You are not responsible for staying in something that is slowly dismantling your sense of reality because you understand why he is the way he is. Understanding someone's pain does not obligate you to absorb it. Understanding someone's history does not mean you have to make yourself smaller and quieter and less of yourself in order to accommodate them. Compassion does not require sacrifice of your own dignity. There are people out there who have been through terrible things and have chosen to do the work, who have been through terrible things and still show up with honesty and care and accountability. His wounds explain him. They don't excuse him. There's a difference, and that difference matters enormously. Now let me talk about what this whole experience tends to do to a woman over time. Because the relationship itself isn't the only thing that suffers here. When you spend months or years in this kind of dynamic, something happens to you internally that takes a long time to name and even longer to heal. You start to doubt your perception. Because you've been told so many times that what you're seeing isn't real, or that your reaction is the problem, you start to genuinely wonder whether you can trust your own mind. You'll have a clear sense that something is wrong, and then almost immediately second guess yourself. And then you'll second guess the second guess, and you'll end up in this exhausting loop of trying to figure out what's real, which was exactly the point of all of it. You start to miniaturize your needs. Because your needs have been treated as problems for so long, you start to pre-edit yourself. You stop asking for things before he even has a chance to shut you down. You tell yourself you're fine when you're not. You say, I don't need much, when actually you do need things. Normal human things. Consistency and honesty and presence and feeling like you matter. And you deserve all of those things. But you've been trained to believe that wanting them makes you difficult. You start to lose the thread of who you were before him. This one is quiet and it sneaks up on you. You look back at photos from a few years ago, or you talk to a friend who knew you before, and you realize that somewhere in this relationship, a version of you got quieter. The version that trusted herself. The version that didn't question every feeling. The version that took up space without apologizing for it. She got smaller. She got uncertain. She learned to tiptoe. And now you're trying to remember who she was and how to get back to her. Here's the thing about that woman. She's not gone. She's been waiting. She's been underneath all of this. Underneath the confusion and the self-doubt and the constant emotional management. She's still there. And the moment you stop putting all your energy into trying to figure him out and start putting it back into yourself, she starts to come back. That's not a small thing. That's actually everything. Now I want to address something directly because I know there will be women watching this who are not completely sure yet, who are on the fence, who see some of these patterns but not all of them, who are hoping that maybe it's not what they think it is, who are looking for permission to stay and keep trying. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not my place, and it's not what this is about. But I am going to say this: hope is not a plan. Staying because you're hoping he'll change without any concrete evidence that he is actually changing is not a relationship strategy. It is a waiting strategy. And while you wait, time passes. Your energy goes elsewhere. You don't heal. You don't open yourself up to anything or anyone new. You stay in a holding pattern that serves him and costs you everything. If there is change happening, it looks like something. It looks like consistent behavior over a sustained period of time. Not grand gestures and apologies, but actual different behavior day after day. It looks like him taking responsibility without being pushed to. It looks like him bringing things up before you have to. It looks like the patterns we've talked about today actually shifting rather than just temporarily quieting down until the heat is off. Change has a texture. It feels different from more of the same. And deep down, you already know the difference. Many women stay because they're afraid of what comes next. The grief, the loneliness, the uncertainty, the fear that they've invested too much to walk away now. But staying in something that keeps hurting you doesn't recover the time you've already lost. It only adds more to it. The truth is that grief fades. Confusion fades. What lasts is the lesson. The qualities that kept you holding on, your empathy, loyalty, patience, and willingness to see the best in people were never the problem. The problem was giving those qualities to someone who treated them as resources instead of gifts. You don't need to become colder. You don't need to stop loving deeply. You simply need to learn where that love belongs. That's why the 5 signs matter. He makes your needs the problem because your needs create accountability. He creates chaos before important moments because chaos keeps you distracted. He uses vulnerability as currency because sympathy is easier to gain than responsibility. He controls access because unpredictability creates attachment. And he makes leaving feel like failure because your self-doubt is what keeps the entire system alive. Taken separately, each behavior can be explained away. Together, they tell a story. And once you see that story clearly, everything changes. Because clarity is difficult, but it is also freeing. It ends the endless cycle of wondering, overanalyzing, and blaming